A very warm welcome to this panel. It's a great honor for me to be here with you today. And of course, I'm not going to be alone. I would like to invite my guests for this panel. Our first guest comes from Belarus. She is the communications director at Zerkalo, a project that reactivated the largest independent media outlet in Belarus. Please welcome Alexandra Pushkina. From the organization Bonishika, she is an advocate for gender and sexuality rights based in Bangladesh and works, among others, on feminist leadership building. Welcome, Tasafi Hossain. See, I was looking for you in the audience, but you have shorter hair. I hadn't recognized you. You may take place there if you like. Thank you, and welcome. Joining us from Mozambique, our next guest was named one of the most influential Africans in 2022. He's a scholar and human rights activist and directs the Centro para Democracia e Direitos Humanos, a human rights organization affiliated to the International Federation of Human Rights. Let's welcome Dr. Adriano Nuvunga. And welcome. Oh, you may sit there. Last but not least, a veteran journalist and pioneer in media development in Sudan. He currently manages one of Sudan's leading media houses. From Ain Media, please welcome Tom Rhodes. Now, before we begin our discussion, it would be quite weird to have a discussion about participation without all of you participating. So again, we will have a question for all of you that you may answer using a QR code that we're going to project. And I would like to invite you to participate in that survey. In this time, you will have different options. And I will ask our colleagues to just show us the question that would like you to answer. And it is journalism responsible for protecting democracy? We will see the results shortly before our Q&A. Let's, in the meantime, of course, delve into the conversation. I'd like to start with you, Alexandra. Belarus has seen one of the most aggressive crackdowns against freedom of the speech and freedom of the press in recent years. What effect does that level of repression have on the willingness of the people to engage in participation in democracies and in social causes?
I want to say, firstly, that result of 2020, it's our work of independent media, because our citizenship have a chance and sources of information. And of course, after our meetings and result of this elections campaign, we had a lot of repressions, and now every independent media working in exile. So now we have new challenges. It's a fine way to our audience inside Belarus, and I think it's our focus to save this part of our audience inside Belarus. But it's really very difficult because we have a really bad situation. We are blocked in Belarus, we are blocked in Russia, and we have this great status of extremist formation. And it's really very difficult to be available to our audience now. So we have a new challenge in every year. So modern journalism must be very creative and very digital. So every time we try to find new solutions every day to be independent media inside Belarus, because we can't be in Belarus now.
So even being available is
Yes.
one of the biggest challenges. However, it's also an environment where people are losing interest, apparently, in the democratic processes in general. Adriano, you work across the African continent. That means with all sorts of governments. Does it take really an oppressive regime to diminish civil participation? Or what's your assessment on why people seem to be losing interest and participating less?
Thank you for being here. I work across Southern Africa. What I see is that though the democratization has made significant progress in terms of bringing people to participate, to be able to vote. I mean, look at South Africans to be able to vote for the first time in 1994. Look at Mozambique after 16 years of long and brutal war to be able to vote for the first time. That was such an empowering moment. However, if you look back at the 3 decades of democratization, you see that big interests have captured our democracies. They have captured democracies in ways that they have reduced the significance and the space for people to participate. Participation is about having those who are in the position of power to listen to what citizens have to say. But leadership today does not listen to the people because they don't represent the interests of the people. So they have no interest to listen. They listen to big interests that have invested in capturing that and marginalizing. You look at numbers. Isn't it surprising to you, ladies and gentlemen, that though countries like Mozambique and others in Southern Africa, they have registered exponential growth of population, but the voter turnouts have decreased substantially. And particularly, it is the young people that is saying, no, this democracy is not working for us, not working for people. So it is the time, Xavier, for the young people properly empowered to take the agency and change the status quo of democracy that is not working for them.
That would set the responsibility on the leaders for sure, but you also mentioned, of course, the very important young people. Tasafi, you work with highly motivated young people in your line of work. What, in your view, makes a difference there? Because on the one hand, we're seeing less interest, but there's also, of course, examples of people who are working very hard to change things.
Yeah, I think I would just like to add to that. A lot of times we think a low voter number is actually not showing interest, but I think, especially for Bangladesh, we just had our recent election in January, and we had a very low voter turnout. I will not talk about the official figures because, yeah, there's other views on that. But I think that was a specific role that people took to show that they are not interested in the position and the elections that we've been having the last, over the last decade or so. And I think there are other kinds of ways young people, we work with a lot of different young groups across different communities in Bangladesh. A lot of it, them from communities who are socially exclusive, who are not part of a lot of the political decision-making spaces. And there is interest when we are sitting in those groups and having conversations. There is a lot of interest, there's a lot of questions, there's a lot of push to try to bring these conversations into decision-making spaces, but that doesn't rarely happen. We really do not see the listening, which is really missing. There might be specific individuals who are interested, who are part of conversations, but when you have a larger political system which is not interested in it, when you have a larger political power which is pushing for the other avenue. And for countries like us, we have a political system which is on one side you have the state and on the other side you have very fundamentalist groups. Then majority of the people actually falls in between that space, and there's very little space to then push for ideas and conversation. Either you're bombarded from this side or that side.
You just mentioned fewer and fewer possibilities to even participate, Tom. Of course, fewer scenarios are more challenging than a civil war like the one unfolding in Sudan. How does a war situation impact civil participation?
Well, hugely, unfortunately. I mean, it's actually dangerous now even to make comments on WhatsApp, for example. You know, you can easily be accused of supporting one of the warring parties for the messages that you say. So we're seeing a huge sort of curtailment of free speech and sadly a huge expansion. I'm sorry I'm being very negative, I know I have to be positive here, but a huge expansion of hate speech, right? I mean, we did this survey with Code for Africa the other day, and we sort of monitored using several platforms to see that hate speech per month at one point was something like 300. We counted before the war, and then after the war it was something like 1.7 thousand. So it's more than exponentially. But having said that, people are still communicating. We have these amazing young people from the emergency response rooms, for example, who are providing soup kitchens, medical support, because the NGOs can't actually get into the country. And they've found the most unique ways to communicate with each other, inside and outside. So it's there, but it's the war has created a lot of ingenuity.
We have to talk about how that discussion is taking place. You say people are communicating, and we're going to go into the role of media, of course. Adriano, when social media first started making headlines, one of the big promises of those platforms was to offer more chances for anyone who wanted to be part of the political discourse. Do you think that's a promise kept when you look at the situation today?
Absolutely, absolutely. The social media is building a momentum towards what I would label as a fourth wave of democratization in the region I come from, which is Southern Africa. Just last week, you might have seen it trending in social media that our colleague at CDD, she was abducted by the police. She was abducted by the police because she was out there reporting to social media in real time the brutality of the police violating human rights. And until today, I'm speaking here, the police hasn't yet returned her phone because they believe that the information that they wanted to stop her from recording, it is in that phone. But that information is already out. So, so social media is really building that. However, the level of penetration of internet, the level of access by the young people in the rural is leaving millions behind. So though we're making progress, and though there is this potential that is out there that I've mentioned, but the numbers that are being left behind are threatening. So we seem to be moving, but we are leaving, as I've said, a great deal of people that would have add to this wave and hopefully make it more impactful. So there is a lot that to be done. We see in Southern Africa, governments are passing restrictive laws. Just in Mozambique, 2 weeks ago, government passed a legislation to increase by 3 to 4 times the cost of internet. So it was already difficult for the people to access. It was already marginalizing, but for those who were accessing it, they are being limited by increasing the cost. And this is because Mozambique is having elections. And the role that the social media has played in exposing fraud has been fundamental in holding electoral institutions accountable in terms of how they were manipulating results. So the dark forces, they want to keep elections unchecked by social accountability, hence making it difficult for the young people to access internet. So there's a great deal of potential there, but a lot needs to be done in making internet accessible and available for the young people.
You want to go? And of course. Yeah.
Yes, of course. Because social media now for Belarus is very important because we had this status of extremist formation for every independent media, and it's more safety to focus on a recommendation system. For example, Instagram Reels, YouTube, and of course TikTok. So we go to this social media and push our content because it's more safety, you don't need a subscription. So when policemen stop you at the street, they can't find the subscription to Zerkala or any another media. So it's more safety. And of course, in our editorial strategy, we go to the platforms where now our audience. We don't push our audience to go to our website because it's more comfortable to people read us or see us on their platform. We have our loyal brand, and I think it's a really good solution for now.
But it may come at a cost. When we're talking about democratic participation and we want people to engage, we want people to exchange opinions, of course social media is the go-to platform or platforms, but Tasafi, before this Global Media Forum, we had a talk, and you mentioned the importance of face-to-face encounters in your line of work as well. Are we just underestimating the importance of being in person when it comes to participation in democracies?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit to the social media. I think Bangladesh went through this big, our social media is largely Facebook still, especially for young people. There's TikTok coming up as a big space. YouTube is big, but not so much for democratic or activism space. But we also see like the surveillance going up as well. And it's to the point where, you know, there's this quote which says there's nothing called the voiceless, it's intentionally silenced. And social media is kind of like that. If you are a community which is continuously silenced in a political environment where you will be targeted, then chances of you even using social media is quite unsafe. So even though it is a mechanism which has been used quite a lot, we can see how surveillance has been dampening that space as well for us. Since we work around a lot around awareness, sensitization, for us, social media is a way to reach out to people, but sensitization also requires continuous space for reflection, discussion, sharing. And I think over social media, that personal, individual connection does not always happen. So even when we are working with different groups in different parts of Bangladesh, we see the value when we have them coming together and they're meeting face to face and they're being able to share their experiences with another person, not even from necessarily the same community, but then be able to understand and relate to the issues at a more human level. And I think that is definitely very important when you want to build those connections, when you want people to really be able to see each other for their humanness.
What role would a journalist have in those encounters? Do you work with them? Would you wish for them to be more present, more active? What's our role there?
Yeah, I think that's kind of, I think also the previous panel talked a lot about human-centered stories and the role of building those connections. So I think sharing stories, sharing specifics, and rather than just statistics always helps. And I think journalism has that role that they can play more of, especially when we are in spaces where certain stories never come to light. So there is a big role to play in bringing those stories out to light.
Tom, do you share that view in a context where availability is difficult, where people maybe even have other priorities than just thinking about, you know, a democratic process because they have to ensure that they get food or water? We're talking about very deep crises here.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's, you know, it sounds sort of like a gimmick, but it's the world's worst humanitarian crisis and most likely the most underreported one as well. People are starving and food becomes first. So yeah, I mean, sometimes I feel that sometimes we get issues such as the media and elections and the political process that the civil society is doing outside of the country is kind of almost ignored or scorned by some communities, but not all, certainly not all. I mean, one of our projects at Ein Media is mobile cinema in really kind of remote areas such as the Nuba Mountains where there's no electricity and there's very little connectivity. So we just sort of drive around on on motorcycles and set up screenings of some of our own videos and other people's videos and hold these kind of public discussions. And that's where the real vibrancy comes in. You know, that's when you really get to connect with the people and get a more nuanced idea of what's going on. Yeah.
So that's organized from the media organization, sponsored by, if you will, and then you invite local communities to watch the movies.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes we have to be very secretive about it, of course. You know, sometimes it's inside. But when we can, we much rather do it out in the bush and, you know, put up a screen and, yeah.
Okay, so that also, of course, stresses out the importance of in-person meeting. Alexandra, when people get asked why they avoid the news, and that's a very important issue and a very important challenge, one of the main reasons cited is that they have the impression that there's nothing they can do about the problems that they're watching, right? We were talking about constructive journalism, of course, but that feeling of impotence is important. How do you counter that perception in your public specifically, which has seen big movements, but also big disappointments in their politics?
You know, now we choose the topics not only about politics, but we try to growing up our audience with helps with another topics, for example, health or parenting. And if our viewers see and read the articles about these topics, it's like growing grassroots initiatives. For example, when we're talking about, I don't know how to say in English, sorry, some solutions for health for kids, our audience call into Ministry of Health and try to find the solution for this medical collapse, and it's one initiative. But when we will have the new situation, political situation, I think our society don't lose this practice to talking with government. So every time we try to talk not only with democratic audience, we try to talk with, for example, officials. Okay, we have this status of extremists, but we call in like ordinary people to government. And sometimes they said some comments to us, and it's like a dialogue, but of course it's not a typical situation, because now the people who want to talk with us, they talking anonymously, and of course our author working anonymously, so it's a really strange journalism, but we try to save this pattern when media try to talk with both of sides. And I think this strategy, it's a strategy which helps us in the future and save this situation when people know how find the information. Because in Belarusian space, now information space, you can find only propaganda, Belarusian propaganda and Russian propaganda. So this save the channels of information. Okay, it's independent media which working in exile, but the society known how to find this information. So if they know that something happened, and they can't find the information in official source, they try to find our media, our independence media, because in government media they don't find the real information.
I'm getting the sense a little bit from what I've heard so far that the solutions are rather indirect, if you will, not directly address the topic, not directly, post a story, do encounters that are discreet, that really, in my view, is a contrast to what we've heard in other global media forums where we're talking about the bold press and how we have to, take action and essentially also have a very strong posture. Is that maybe a development? Do you see that, Adriano, for example, that the media has to go by maybe all this polarization and conflicts to find access to the public?
Yes and no. In contexts where democracy or democratization has left millions behind, the aspiration for people to improve their livelihood in post-crisis situations has not yet been attained. And the media has a great deal of role to play in, on the one hand, ensuring that in a context of diversity, not only the dominating groups, they shape governance, shape policies, etc. But more importantly, those small groups, they also they have a seat in the table. This is key. It's key for peace. It's key for stability, but it's also key for the future of democracy. Now, because the big media also, as we're talking about, it is dominated by big interests. It is responding to the big corporate interests. It is fundamental that the social media plays this role, as she was talking about, and also talking about, on the one hand, of making sure that people can still connect, even if not interacting directly, because that it helps in context of crisis, in context where autocracies, they are not favorable to see people coming together. It enables people to keep engaging and to keep to seek in a created type of spaces, mechanisms to participate, but also and fundamentally, in contexts where authoritarianism is making it difficult for transparency and for participation, social media is fundamental to allow, as we're saying, to allow all segments of society to have a say, and to have a say in a way that it is safe. It is safe for them. Look at HRDs, human rights defenders across Africa. They are under surveillance, including digital surveillance. Yeah. They are attacked. So these alternative ways through social media, they still ensure that they can meaningfully participate while they remain safe.
All right, but that essentially excludes the mainstream media. I think both of you have suggested that the solution to less democratic participation does not really include them. Tom, you're one of the most established media companies in Sudan. Do you agree that the solution doesn't necessarily pass through that road?
I don't know if we're the biggest media company. That's very nice of you. But
one of the.
One of the, yeah, fair enough. No, I agree. Actually, I think a lot of our audience has to circumnavigate their way through particularly the broadcasters who have been historically government controlled and basically, I get in trouble for this, but propagandists, with their viewpoints. But something interesting is that our biggest competitor isn't really other media. It's sort of the trolls that are online, who are working day and night for one of the other warring parties and just constantly churning out information. You know, I mean, when this war started, I spent a lot of sleepless nights stupidly looking at all this propaganda. You get sucked into it, and if I could get sucked into it, what about other people? You know, so but the positive side is I think at AIN is that I think people have learned to differentiate between propaganda and factual professional news. So our audience reach has skyrocketed. You know, people actually see us as something that they can trust in, and that's a really special thing, you know. So
we're talking a lot about narratives here, and you have dedicated a large part of the work to change established narratives. How do you do that through the journalism or through journalists? What's your line of work with the press?
Not a lot, I have to say.
Yeah, you look a little bit skeptical.
But I do see there being a very important role there. I think especially in countries like ours, when you have a strong state, journalism plays a very big role of accountability and holding the state accountable, which we see reducing more and more. So I do think like social media is a space for opinions and views to come out, but media journalism, I think, has a strong role in terms of using their voice to ensure all of these different views are coming up, that it's not just a popularist view that we see in journalist spaces. I think this also came up in the previous panel, like how to ensure that all the different voices come. And at the same time, being able to push for accountability from the state, who is supposed to have the role to ensure that those multiple voices are there. And the more we see that reducing, I think there definitely is. We do interact and engage with journalism and journalists in terms of their understanding about a lot of issues, human rights aspects, communities that we are working with, which is not part of the larger mainstream conversations, how they can be more sensitive in terms of bringing up what they're putting out there. So there is a big role in terms of understanding communities, understanding issues from the perspective of communities that we are working with. And so there is very much a strong role in how responsibly journalism is played out, and at the same time, creating that pressure. And I think that is something we see a lot of lack of.
But it's still one of the classic roles, for sure, of journalism. The question is whether we are actually responsible as journalists for the democratic participation and for protecting democracy. And I'd like to show you the results of your audience poll that we had at the beginning. So I don't know if we can project the results on our screen so you can see that. Maybe to no surprise, but it's a big majority for yes, we are responsible for protecting democracy. However, 14 of you don't agree, and 24 of you are not so sure. So I'd like to open the forum to you now if you want to ask any questions to our panelists. And I see a first hand over there. The lady in red. Just going to take a few seconds for you to get the microphone. Over there? Oh. Can we? Yeah, I saw you first, maybe you second in the back. So yeah, you can go there, I guess, yeah. Is the microphone on? Technically, someone should reach out a microphone to, oh, there you go. Okay, maybe. Okay, there you go.
Okay, hi. My name is plethora. I work as a senior legal advisor for the European Center for Press and Media Freedom. We are based in Leipzig, in Germany. We're here because today at 3:30, we're providing a workshop together with the legal director of The Guardian on SLAPS, strategic lawsuits against public participation. Since we're talking about public participation, one of the biggest threats and obstacles in Europe is the legal actions based on criminal laws, civil laws, administrative laws that are posed to journalists activists, environmentalists, etc. There are European instruments and standards now, and we're providing support to journalists. But my question for the panelists is this one of the types of threats that you face in your own region? Are journalists and activists being sued, and do they receive support? Thank you very much.
Do you want the question for a specific panelist, or can it be open to anyone?
If this is a problem for a specific region, then...
I think it's a problem for all of you, but if anyone wants to go first or answer, take that.
Well, throughout Southern Africa and Africa generally, journalists and human rights defenders, they are threatened physically, their integrity and their life. And many, unfortunately, they pay with their own life for the work that they do. This is one extreme. The other is they don't push that level because they suffocate media houses with threats to close the support. Mozambique, for instance, the private sector is so small to support journalists. So only the state can pay publicity, for instance, in some journals. Then if you insist publishing stories that affect their interest, they simply close that and they suffocate journalists. They bleed to death, so to say. So they don't spend much time with that because they can silence you with socioeconomic instruments, including targeting you physically.
All right, there was another question in the back. Yes. Sorry.
Thank you. My name is Emin Hussein. I'm a journalist from Azerbaijan, but I'm living in exile. You mentioned the topics, how the journalist is supposed to defend democracies, but my questions are opposite questions. How the democracies supposed to defend journalists? For example, I'm from Azerbaijan, Council of Europe member states, as like a Germany and other 46 member states. But the 45 member states, according to the Council of Europe Journalist Safety Platform, Azerbaijan #1 country who jailed their own journalists, and especially this imprisonment increased since Azerbaijan got host country status for COP29, which is supposed to held in Azerbaijan this November. And last week in Bonn, we participate on the SB60 and many biggest environmental and climate change conference, which is every year organized here. And we didn't see any European head of the state or the head of the permanent missions who attend to the SB60, and none of them speak up on the journalists, which is 30 of them today jailed, tortured, and last journalist arrested just yesterday. How is democracy supposed to defend these people? Because we are member of the Council of Europe. We are member of OEC, but everyone, sometimes we have a feeling for democracies betrayed their own journalists, and sometimes journalists defend shoulder to shoulder democracies more than the government and head of the democratic state. I thank you. Yeah. I'm sorry for the long
all question. Good. We have just about time for a short answer from the panel, if anyone wants to delve in. Have an applause for him, of course. Maybe Alexandra?
Yes, I want to say that we have a similar situation, so I support you because our editor-in-chief and CEO are now imprisoned, and this great professional have 12 years for each, and Marina and Mila now in a colony in Belarus. And more than 30 journalists now in Belarus in jail. And of course we have, we feel the support, but you know it's not enough because some of imprisoned journalists now on the finish of their sentence. So I think it's a really big problem. because we need this support to unprison our journalists, because journalism is always the first line of defeat. Sorry. So yes, we need the support from democratic countries.
And maybe we just simply also need the support from the democratic populations, as long as they have that privilege. That's all we have time for, unfortunately, but I want to thank you for this discussion. Alexandra, Tasafi, Adriano, Tom, thank you so much. Thank you to you for your participation.